when we are done with that, we will switch over to a different topic, that is hierarchy of courts. And there I will discuss with you few provisions of CRPC. As I told you yesterday, that now we will, in each lecture, we will try to discuss some provisions of CRPC, because the introductory part is by and large over. So these lectures, in one way, are kind of an entry to CRPC, but the main lectures which would be or can be treated to be an entry to CRPC will start next week, when we will start our discussion on initiation of a criminal case or reporting of crime. So once again, same request, start reading. So once again, this same request, that start reading table of contents of CRPC, so that you can familiarize yourself with the provisions, with the kind of provisions that are there in CRPC. So let's start today's lecture. So yesterday we discussed about stakeholders of criminal justice administration. We talked about state as a stakeholder, accused, victim, witnesses, and society as a stakeholder in the criminal justice administration. Thereafter, we started our discussion on functionaries in criminal justice administration, and there I discussed with you very briefly that following are the functionaries of criminal justice administration. Number 1, police. Number 2, prosecution. Number 3, defense counsel. Number 4, court. And number 5, prison and correctional authorities. And there is, I also discussed with you a simpler way to remember all those things, so that you don't have to cram these things, that all the functionaries of the criminal justice administration can be studied by dividing them into pre-trial, during trial, or post-trial stage. So accordingly, you can remember that which functionary you are talking about, and at what stage of criminal proceeding that functionary would perform certain function or exercise certain powers in furtherance of performance of its functions. So today we will be dealing with these functionaries in more detail, a little detail, not much detail, but a little detail. So yesterday, when I discussed with you that police is one of the functionary of criminal justice administration, I told you that you must include within the ambit of this functionary all special investigation agencies as well, like CBI, NIA, ED, or there may be a situation wherein there is a special investigation agency at the level of the state, Can you give me some example from your own state wherein there is a special investigation agency other than the police in your state? Anyone?
STF, Special Task Force.
STF has the power to, all the powers, police powers, to arrest, investigate the crimes.
सर जब पुलिस फेल हो जाती है तब फिर यूपी सीएम अथॉरिटी देता है एसटीएफ को.
नहीं, वो तो ऐसा नहीं है, एसटीएफ का डोमेन थोड़ा सा अलग है, बट हाँ, इट कुड बी एग्जांपल, और सीबीसीआईडी कुड बी एग्जांपल इन उत्तर प्रदेश. I do not know whether it exists now also, but earlier it used to be specialized investigation agency on the lines of CBI in Uttar Pradesh. I do not know what is its fate nowadays, but earlier it was one of the investigation agencies. Any other state which you are familiar with wherein there is a special investigation agency other than the police?
Sir, SFIOs, Serious Financial Fraud Investigation Office.
Where is it?
So Delhi?
No, it's a central government agency.
Okay, sir.
If I'm not wrong. I'm talking about state government agencies.
State, okay.
Yeah. So now leave that side for a while. Now the main powers which police or which this functionary exercise under CRPC, or those investigating special investigating agencies could exercise under the act under which they have been created, are basically relating to arrest, search, seizure, investigation, and prevention of crime. So, broadly are the main functions of the police. So whenever you hear about the word arrest, search and seizure, you can safely call these actions to be a part of police powers. So which means, when I am using this word police powers, which means that no other authority have these powers. It is only police or any other investigating agency which has been conferred with the police powers, which can perform these functions. Any other authority cannot perform these functions. Similar is the situation with investigation. So investigation is an exercise of collection of evidences once a crime has been reported to the police or any other investigating agency. So this function also, the function to do investigation, it can only be performed by police. No other authority or agency could perform this function. It can only be performed by police or can be performed by any other investigation agency to whom such power has been conferred. And last one is prevention of crime. Police also works with an object to prevent the crime as well. But there, police is assisted by the executive magistrate more. So executive magistrate, they have a huge say. I'll discuss this with you while discussing about the courts, but I'm introducing this idea that executive magistrate, and I'll discuss this also, that how should you identify the executive magistrate and judicial magistrate and why the distinction is important. And you can easily identify them in your own district, that look, these people are the executive magistrate or falls within the category of executive magistrate, and these would fall under judicial magistrate. In prevention of crime, by and large, police are guided by executive magistrates or magisterial power. So there is a difference between both magisterial powers and executive magisterial power and police powers. So that I do not know whether we would be able to discuss in detail, but I may be talking about these things in very brief. Now, these are the main functions or powers of the police: arrest, investigation, prevention of crime. Now, coming to how police is regulated, which is the law under which police has been created and will be regulated. So most of the state police in India, they are till today, they are governed by this very old act of colonial era, Police Act of 1861. I think you must have heard about it, or if you may not have heard about it, it is the primary legislation under which you will find the provisions which regulates or deals with the functions relating to police. Each state, or I would say, however, each state has its own police regulation. So suppose if you type on your computer or phone UP Police, so it will take you to official website of UP Police. There you can find those regulations, that which are the regulations which governs or regulates the functioning of the police, or which tells the police that in X situation you are required to do this, in Y situation you are required to do this. These police regulations, they are in addition to the provisions of CRPC. So CRPC in a way provides you the general skeleton. How that skeleton is to be actually executed on the ground can be understood not merely by giving a reading to CRPC, but you have to read police regulations, Police Act plus CRPC together. Then only you will have an idea about that what actually police is supposed to do or required to do under law in cases of reporting of crime, that is lodging of FIR, or in cases of arrest, search, seizure, and investigation. So each state has its own police regulation as well, enacted under, or rules or regulation. There may be more than one rules. अब कोई रूल ऐसा भी हो सकता है वेलफेयर ऑफ द पुलिस पर्सनल्स, वो तो काम का नहीं है उस टॉपिक के लिए जो हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. बट यू शुड हैव दिस फेयर आइडिया दैट पुलिस almost in most all states, police are governed by Police Act plus any rules or regulations that have been drafted under the Police Act. In addition to that, there are some state police. I have not written examples of such state police which are governed or regulated by a specific legislation, a special act that has been enacted after independence. And most of the special investigating agencies, they are created under a special act and accordingly regulated by the provisions of that special act. For example, CBI is regulated or governed by the provisions of Delhi Police Special Establishment Act. Do you have any idea of a state which has its own police act to regulate or govern the functioning of the police? Any state? So this you can do as an exercise. जिस भी स्टेट से आप आते हो, जिस भी स्टेट के आप प्राइमरी रेजिडेंट हो, जहाँ से आपका मूल निवास प्रमाण पत्र और वोटिंग आईडी कार्ड जुड़ा हुआ है, तो आप अपने स्टेट में देखोगे whether your police is being governed or regulated by provisions of Police Act 1861 read with rules and regulation framed thereunder, or your police is governed by a special legislation enacted by your state legislature for the purpose of governing the functioning of the police. So that is one exercise you can do. It's easier to tell those acts when it comes to special investigation agencies. Slightly difficult to tell those legislations when it comes to state police. Now, last point on this issue is that police could be under state police, and it could be a police which is directly which fall directly under the authority of central government, home ministry. And could you give examples of such police which functions directly under the authority of the home ministry? सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की पुलिस बोल सकते हैं आप उनको. दिल्ली पुलिस, ठीक है जी. दिल्ली पुलिस के अलावा
सर चंडीगढ़ पुलिस.
हाँ जी. Why चंडीगढ़ पुलिस? Can you give the reason?
Sir, because it is
union territory. It is a union territory, and nowadays when Jammu and Kashmir is union territory, so therefore Ladakh and Jammu Kashmir का पुलिस would also be
सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट पुलिस.
हाँ, ठीक है. थोड़ा सा अब चेक कर लेना इसको, बट जो रीजन आपने दिया है और जो मुझे भी लगता है इज ए करेक्ट रीजन, उसके हिसाब से दैट पुलिस शुड नाउ फॉल विद इन द एम्बिट ऑफ अथॉरिटी ऑफ सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट एंड डायरेक्टली अंडर द अथॉरिटी ऑफ specific ministry of home affairs of the central government. Now it is interesting to note that when we say that there are some police in certain union territories which falls directly under the authority of the central government, especially directly under the authority of, to be specific, under the home ministry. Home ministry also exercise authority over other armed forces, but do they have police powers like other armed forces? Means home ministry also exercise authority over CISF, CRPF, Seema Suraksha Bal, SSB, Assam Rifles, ITBP, BSF, Rashtriya Rifles in Jammu and Kashmir, RR, which is popularly known as RR, Tripura Police, and there is a long list. So do these forces also have police powers, or their function is altogether different than police?
So somehow
they're paramilitary forces, right? So they come under the army.
No यार, ये तो सिंपल सी चीज है, तो जीके का चीज है, तो लॉ की चीज भी नहीं है. Paramilitary forces comes under the authority of the home ministry. Army functions under defense ministry. ठीक है जी. दोनों के ऑब्जेक्टिव और फंक्शन अलग अलग होते हैं. पैरामिलिट्री फोर्स का मतलब है फोर्स विच हैज बीन क्रिएटेड फॉर मेंटेनेंस ऑफ इंटरनल लॉ एंड ऑर्डर. आर्मी का मतलब है फोर्स विच हैज बीन क्रिएटेड फॉर द डिफेंस ऑफ द कंट्री टू प्रोटेक्ट सॉवरेनिटी एंड इंटीग्रिटी ऑफ द कंट्री. ठीक है जी। सो जितनी लिस्ट मैंने आपको ये बताई है, बीएसएफ हो गई, आईटीबीपी हो गई। बीएसएफ बॉर्डर प्रोटेक्ट करती है, स्पेशली जो पाकिस्तान के साथ लगती है। आईटीबीपी जो चाइना और नेपाल के साथ बॉर्डर, नहीं, चाइना के साथ जो बॉर्डर है उसको प्रोटेक्ट करती है। एसएसबी जो है वो नेपाल की बॉर्डर को प्रोटेक्ट करती है। असम राइफल्स वगैरह, फिर नॉर्थ ईस्ट में जो इंसर्जेंसी है उसकी वजह से क्रिएट हुई थी त्रिपुरा पुलिस, असम राइफल्स। RR was created because to deal with the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. CISF gives protection to industrial establishment. CRPF deals with basically any internal disturbance which has not reached to the level of a foreign threat, but which is an internal threat, internal armed threat like Naxalism or other kinds of threats. So the idea there is slightly different. But if I ask you this question, for example, my question was that do these forces, all these forces, they have police powers? A normal guess, just make a guess. Do they have the power
No,
to
sir.
arrest, search, seize, investigation?
No, sir.
No, sir.
वो
No.
स्टेट पुलिस के पास है।
हाँ, their function is altogether different than police. They do not enjoy police powers. They do not enjoy police power. So this entire structure is also interesting. If you get some time to read about it as well, the creation of paramilitary forces and different reasons for which different paramilitary forces are created. For example, when RR was created, the moot question was that who would serve as members of RR. So then army came up with this idea that look, we will provide the men, and you create this and let it function as a civil kind of an armed force. So when something is being governed by Home Ministry, it means it's civil. Police is a civil body. Okay? It's not army. So the distinction needs to be understood here. Similar is the situation with other armed paramilitary forces. They are basically falling within the domain of civil side of the government, civil side of the government. So then army said that we will supply the men, and because the policy of the government was you need to send your men in boots, green boots, back to the barracks. You cannot have your man in green boots always around in the city, in the entire state. It does not give a good impression to the international community. So therefore they end up creating RR and giving more powers to state police to have a balance in terms of counterinsurgency mechanism. But that's outside our domain. The second functionary of criminal justice administration is prosecution or prosecutors. Now we know this fact from our discussion that crime is treated to be an act against the state. So therefore state takes upon itself the responsibility of prosecuting the accused person. And it is because of this responsibility which has been undertaken by the state, right from the reporting of crime till filing of charge sheet, police is performing its function. But once a magistrate has taken cognizance and decided to send the accused for trial, then during trial, the prosecution shall be conducted by the state functionary, which we popularly known as prosecutors, state prosecutors, or state prosecuting authority. So the government, both at the state level and central level, have powers to appoint prosecutors for conducting prosecution on their behalf in the High Court, Sessions Court, and courts of magistrate. So for this, you can read section 24 and 25 of CRPC. I won't be discussing in detail about it, but section 24 talks about Office of Public Prosecutor, and 25 talks about other public prosecutors. इसका थोड़ा सा आइडिया अगर आपको दूं मैं, तो जो public prosecutor होता है, that person, public prosecutors in almost all states are nominated. There is a process. In UP, the process, I guess, is that DM plays a very important role in picking up the names of the lawyers in a particular district, sending them to the state government or high court, and then they are sending them to state government, not high court, state government, and then state government appoints public prosecutor in each district. So it is normally considered to be a political post. In High Court, state is represented by, any idea? In High Court, state is represented by, if anyone is from Uttar Pradesh, because I can tell you more about Uttar Pradesh because I am a resident of that state.
Solicitor General?
No. In High Court, who represents state
Advocate
government?
General.
Sorry, Advocate General.
एडवोकेट जनरल, और वहां पे भी ना दो साइड में डिवाइड कर देते हो, एक तो होता है जीए गवर्नमेंट एडवोकेट और एक होता है स्टैंडिंग काउंसिल. तो सिविल और क्रिमिनल साइड में ये दोनों रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं, एक क्रिमिनल साइड में रिप्रेजेंट करता है, एक सिविल साइड में रिप्रेजेंट करता है, और ये लोग एक्ट करते हैं अंडर द सुपरविजन ऑफ द एडवोकेट जनरल ऑफ द स्टेट. एंड in case of central government is represented by Solicitor General and Additional Solicitor General under the supervision and direction of Attorney General of India. तो ये तो होगी सिचुएशन हाई कोर्ट और सुप्रीम कोर्ट की. बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू district courts, who will be conducting the prosecution? If somebody asks you this question, that who will be conducting the prosecution, तो थोड़ा सा वहां पे डिफरेंस ये है कि the office of public prosecutor is by and large in India is a political office. Because if suppose in UP DM exercise a lot of influence to pick and choose people who are going to be appointed as public prosecutor, and DM is a government man, so he is not going to send a name which is not within a good taste of the government of the present day. As far as APP is concerned, most of the states, they conduct an exam. And you must be familiar with that particular exam. In UP, that exam is known as APO ka exam, Assistant Prosecution Officer. So basically, these people are recruited to represent state in magistrates courts. So this is in brief about this prosecution. So state creates this entire prosecution system. And these people, members of prosecution system, they are paid and taken care of by the state. So when a crime is committed, it is stated to be an act against the state. So state exercise this responsibility to prosecute that particular crime. Here, a small thing that you just have to keep in mind is, and we will discuss it once again, that if a trial is being conducted by the Sessions Court, then the prosecution shall be conducted by the public prosecutor, which I told you is by and large is a nominated kind of office. You are appointed by a process. There is no such exam for recruiting public prosecutors. Now, there is no specific provision in the code that who is going to represent state in court of magistrate. But if you go to the ground and look at who is representing the state, then generally assistant public prosecutor is representing the state in the magistrate courts. Now, point number 1 and 2 are relevant only in those cases where case has been started by filing an FIR. Cases related to a cognizable offense. But suppose if a private criminal complaint has been filed which deals with a non-cognizable offense, then the person who is filing the complaint has to hire an advocate to conduct prosecution. In very few cases wherein state's interest is also involved, their state could come forward and conduct the prosecution. But in most of the cases of private complaint, prosecution shall be conducted by the advocate hired by the complainant. So do keep in mind this distinction. So there are, in conclusion, there are three main points. The first is that state conducts the prosecution in session courts through public prosecutor in all cognizable offenses. Point number 2, state conducts the prosecution in magistrates court, be it CGM ka court or judicial magistrate first class or second class, in case of cognizable offenses through assistant public prosecutors. In different states, you may come across different names of assistant public prosecutor, APP. And this, I told you, they are recruited through an exam, competitive exam, in almost all states. So, and then third important point is that in case the case is relating to a known cognizable offense, and the aggrieved person has approached a magistrate's court by filing a criminal complaint, then in that situation, prosecution shall not be conducted by the state prosecutors. Rather, it shall be conducted by the complainant himself or his duly authorized advocate. In exceptional cases, in this situation also, state could step in and conduct the prosecution through its prosecuting agencies. Now, this I don't think is relevant at this juncture. This paragraph, you can read it or leave it, not much of relevance. But this entire structure of prosecution has been heavily debated in Malimat committee. I guess there is a detailed discussion. Law Commission of India has also in its reports talked about how we can make our prosecution system more efficient and effective. But by and large, we have not witnessed any changes in our prosecution system. And some people say that the major cause of delay in criminal trial is this prosecution machinery that exists in almost all the states. And it is also a main reason behind low rate of conviction in India. Even in very heinous cases, the incompetency or ineffectiveness of the prosecution agencies plays a very decisive role in keeping this crime rate low. But we will not go into that domain. As I have told you, that we will not be discussing things like how corrupt is one agency, how ineffective is one agency. Our main focus is to discuss the law, not the things that could happen inside an actual courtroom. We are trying to acquaint ourselves with the theoretical framework of CRPC. So now, third functionary is defense counsel. And here there is one important point to remember, and that is state would intervene from the side of accused person by arranging an advocate to represent him only in those cases wherein accused is poor or indigent person and does not have enough resources to hire any advocate. ये एक सिचुएशन है, ये एक परिस्थिति है जहां पे जो राज्य है वो अभियुक्त की तरफ से एक जो काउंसिल होता है उसको अरेंज करेगा, एंड दैट लॉयर वुड रिप्रेजेंट that accused during the trial. He would be his defense counsel इस situation में. Now there has been a huge discussion because India is not a very rich country. We are quite poor as far as economic development is concerned. If you leave few pockets, and even in those pockets there are serious problems. People do not earn much on a monthly basis or a daily basis or yearly basis. The earning levels in India are very low. So therefore, this is a common problem in India, that a person who has committed the crime or accused of committing a crime happens to be a poor person. So, for example, how many people in India lives below poverty line? What is the percentage? Not the number of people, not absolute number. Any idea? Anyone?
10%.
अरे यार, चाइना ही घूम रहा है वहाँ शायद 10%.
Around 50%.
But government statistics put it about 20%. UN statistics put it when they say that this is the benchmark to decide who is poor and who is not poor, then it can go above it. But India's population is so huge that if you convert that percentage into absolute numbers, then the number is very large, very large. And this percentage was much higher. This percentage was much higher before 1990s. This percentage was much higher. So उस time में आप अपने आप को ले जाओ, and suppose the number of people who are living below poverty line are 40% or 45%, for example, at a particular point of time before 1990. So then every 1 out of 3 cases or 2 cases would involve such a person or such accused person who does not have enough resources to represent himself. And then in that situation, Supreme Court came into picture and delivered two decisions, Khatri versus State of Bihar and Sukhdas versus Arunachal Pradesh, wherein court declared right to free legal aid to an accused person is a fundamental right. तो इसको दोबारा से पढ़ लो जितना मैंने अंडरलाइन किया है. You should know the background that why Supreme Court had to step in and create such a right, because the year in which this right was created, the number of people who are living below poverty line, that number was very huge. Therefore, they were aware of this fact that every 1 person out of 2 or 3 is going to be an indigent person. And if law does not protect the interest of the accused, then it will fail in its objective. So therefore, they said that right to free legal aid to an accused person is a fundamental right. If that accused person is unable to engage the services of a lawyer on account of reasons such as being poor or indigent. Now, there was a provision in CRPC as well, but the moment you have recognized it as a fundamental right, it has given a deep impetus to this idea that state should play an active role in providing a defense counsel to a poor accused person, So this is the only important point which I wanted to discuss with you in relation to defense counsel. वैसे तो बड़ा simple सा है कि if the accused person is not poor, then it means he has the resources to hire a lawyer. So then the lawyer which he is hiring shall be known as a defense counsel in criminal justice administration, and that defense counsel would be treated to be an important functionary in criminal justice administration. Now, this topic you must have touched upon while studying jurisprudence, wherein the ambit of this topic was a bit larger. You discussed it with the help of Legal Services Authorities Act. So now, though in India, the ambit of legal services have been widened. जो खत्री और सुखदास वाली situation थी, wherein legal services could also can only be enjoyed by accused person who is poor. But now there is a list of people who can enjoy legal services in India. Almost all kind of legal services, be it a civil case or criminal case, irrespective of that, the nature of the case. Now, fourth functionary of criminal justice administration are courts. So I will come back to this topic and discuss this in detail by discussing the hierarchy of the courts. But before that, we will move on to the last functionary, fifth functionary, prison authorities or correctional service personnel. So we had quite a good discussion at the end of our lecture yesterday, wherein we were of this unanimous opinion कि भाई under trial के लिए you should create something different and new system should be there to detain under trial people. You should not put them in the same jail in which has been created to house convicted persons for the purpose of serving their sentence. But the situation is that be it police or be it prison, both P2 or P square, whatever you want to call them, they are being governed by outdated colonial laws. There had been several decisions of the Supreme Court on prison reforms police reforms. It's quite a popular topic within the corridors of the Supreme Court, but nothing much could have been achieved. But one point which you should know about prison authorities, that India is trying hard to move from the idea of prison system to the idea of correctional system. Anything which you could add to it? What is this idea all about, wherein you move from prison system to correctional system? What will you be doing in moving towards this idea of correctional system?
So rehabilitation homes, maybe,
or punitive to reformative. So the answer to this question can easily be found if you read theories of criminology, like or theories relating to the idea of punishment. That how should you look at the punishment? Should you look at the punishment as a retributive measure? So initially the idea behind punishing a criminal was retribution. Retribution, because he has done something against a person. So now state would assist the victim ka family or victim, if victim is alive, to extract a certain degree of retribution. और अगर आप देखो throughout world till today, different methods exist for extracting this retribution. For example, in tribal communities of Fata Northwest Frontier Province, or the area which is mainly represented by Pashtuns or Taliban, they have this idea till today of blood money. Anyone who knows anything about blood money?
So it is it is up to the victim's family to forgive or decide.
No, blood money. The idea. What is the idea of blood money?
So you pay compensation to the victim.
You are correct to a certain extent. So in traditional societies, in some tribal traditional societies, if somebody happens to commit a crime, heinous crime against someone, तो जो accused होता था ना, instead of putting him on trial, because there was no formal system as such as we have now, what people used to do, what that tribe used to do, they used to ask that person to pay a certain amount of monetary benefit to the victim or victim's family. This is known as blood money. That you have spilled the blood of my family, so therefore you should retribute by paying certain amount of money. Now,
So,
this
isn't it a kind of a negotiation?
ऐसा खूब होता है मुजफ्फरनगर मेरठ में, from where I come, wherein people take money and they do faisla of the case, but forget about that for a while. Similar kind of thing is going to happen in Sushil Kumar case, most probably. People from the caste, they will come together, and they will try to convince the accused family after 2 years, when the impression of the crime would start fading away. So then you start picking up the talks with the family of the victim, because this is what I am witnessing since my teenage years, that you start picking up the victim's family after few years. शायद अब थोड़ा tone down हो गए हो. You start sending people that, do you want to talk and let us agree outside the court, and then you turn hostile during the trial, and इसको वहाँ की भाषा में it's an agreement to absolve the accused person of all criminal liability or responsibility, but in most cases accused ka family pays, or accused pays a huge amount of money to victim's family. So this is the idea of blood money. And so the initial idea behind punishing someone was of retribution, similar to the blood money. Blood money is one form of retribution. Other form of retribution could be that if the accused person, if the person who has committed a crime against you is sent to the prison, then you in a way have extracted a retribution by way of this. If suppose he is sent to gallows, death penalty, then you feel more high as far as this level of retribution is concerned. But now we are moving towards, or since last few decades, I do not know how we are moving, but theoretically we are moving. People are writing a lot about it. We are moving. I do not know how much we have moved, but basically we want to move towards a direction wherein we treat punishment not as a retributive thing, but rather a reformative idea. कि चलो गलती हो गई है किसी से, क्या वो क्या बोलते हैं कि सेटन वेटन वाली कुछ ऐसा कुछ एक सेइंग है ना, एक दो बड़ी अच्छी सी दैट, बट वो एक कहानी भी है, अंगुली मार डाकू वाली कहानी है. सो द रिफॉर्मेशन का आइडिया इज समथिंग रिलेटेड टू दैट, एंड देयर आर मेनी स्टोरीज अबाउट इट दैट देयर इज ऑलवेज a scope of reformation in the worst person, but that's not a pretty good idea in respect to some persons. But as some countries in Scandinavia or Western Europe, they have able to achieve this kind of idea, that is why the entire world is running towards it without appreciating the circumstances or conditions in their own country. So that is one problem with it. So that is why correctional services personnel are also a part of prison authorities or prison system. And we do have a legislation which is titled as Probation of Offenders Act. Probation of Offenders Act. If you are a first time offender convicted of a crime specified under the Probation of Offenders Act, then you can get some kind of relief from the side of the state, and you don't have to serve the entire sentence that has been pronounced against you. So this is in brief about functionaries of criminal justice administration. There's a very good book, I'm forgetting the name. It's about a woman जिसके भाई ने कोई sexual offense commit किया था किसी के against में. Now that family के men, they committed the same offense against that woman, and she has written a book about it. It's a case of Pakistan, and this is also idea of retribution, tribal retribution, you can say it, not a kind of retribution that we generally witness through courts. It's through the society. या फिर कभी कभी आपने देखा हो कि कहीं न्यूज में कि अमुक जाति का लड़का अमुक जाति की लड़की या धर्म की लड़की के साथ eloped and got married, lost somewhere, and then the family of that अमुक जाति का लड़का और लड़की, depending upon who is at the upper hierarchy, who is at the lower hierarchy, they are being made the object of retribution, the subject of retribution to achieve the higher object of frustration being suffered by a particular family. So you can see this idea of retribution floating around in those legal systems also, wherein there is a formal wherein there exists a formal legal system like courts or a very formal civil procedure, there also you could see such ideas floating around. So now we'll move on to hierarchy of the courts. If you want to ask anything about it, then you can ask. And I guess we won't be able to discuss the hierarchy of the courts because we are almost about to reach 2:55. But I'll show you a chart. please take a screenshot of it because I haven't shared this chart with you on your Google Classroom. So Abhimanyu, if you could take a screenshot of it and then share it in your WhatsApp group.
Okay, sir. I'll do that, sir.
So for a while, do not read these things. जो हर एक कोड के नीचे लिखा हुआ है, रेट, अपीलेट, एडवाइजरी, रेफरेंस, इनको थोड़ा सा भूल जाओ क्योंकि अभी आपने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का पेपर नहीं पढ़ा है, कोर्स नहीं पढ़ा है, थोड़ा सा आइडिया लगाना इनका मुश्किल हो जाता है. I will introduce you to the idea of reference revision in appeal in CRPC, but it will take us a while to reach that particular stage. But this is the hierarchy on the criminal side, if you could look at it. At the highest level, we have Supreme Court. Under it, we have high courts in different states, and then we have sessions court in different sessions division. Then under sessions court, we have assistant session judge, chief judicial magistrate, and then territorially, some areas are designated as metropolitan areas, which I'll discuss with you with the help of provisions of CRPC tomorrow. So don't worry about it कि ये metropolitan magistrate किस जगह पे होता है और ये नया term कहाँ से आ गया एकदम से. So then chief judicial magistrate के नीचे you have additional CJMs and subdivisional magistrate. Then you have judicial magistrate first class, second class, first class, second class. Now, what is important in it? Not this exact hierarchy. The things which are more important for us as a CRPC ka, discussion is that which court has what power when it comes to sentence or when it comes to giving punishment. So High Court can pronounce any sentence authorized by law, be it in terms of imprisonment of any duration, death penalty, or any amount of fine. This is provided under section 28 subsection 1, that High Court can pronounce any sentence authorized by law. Court of Session, including additional session judge, mark this word, it's additional, not assistant. So Court of Session, you can say, is also empowered to pronounce any sentence authorized by law, but if it pronounces a sentence of death, then it has to be confirmed by the High Court under section 368. Under section 368. So this is what is provided under 28.1 and 28.2. Section 28.1 and 28.2. If you have your Bare Act with you, you can mark section 28 that we have discussed. Section 28. Now, below that you have Court of Assistant Session Judge, which has the power to give or to pronounce an imprisonment up to 10 years and any amount of fine. And this is provided under section 28.3, subsection 3. Now the court of both Chief Judicial Magistrate and Chief Metropolitan Magistrate, in case the area is a metropolitan area recognized by law, designated under the provisions of the law, CJMs and CMMs, including additional CJM and additional CMMs, they are empowered to pass an imprisonment up to 7 years and a fine. And this is provided under section 29 subsection 1. You will find the authority which CJM has to pronounce a sentence. And under 29.4 you would find the power of CMMs to pronounce a sentence of up to 7 years, imprisonment up to 7 years and any amount of fine. Now, below that we have Judicial Magistrate First Class, which is empowered to pronounce a sentence up to 3 years and a fine of maximum rupees 10,000. And this is provided under 29.2 and 29.4. 29.2 talks about the power of Judicial Magistrate First Class to pronounce a sentence. And 29.4 talks about Metropolitan Magistrate. Now, in metropolitan area, there are no Metropolitan Magistrate First Class or Second Class. You have only Metropolitan Magistrate under Chief Metropolitan Magistrate. At the lowest level of the hierarchy of the criminal courts, you have Judicial Magistrate Second Class, which is empowered under law to pronounce a sentence of 1 year and a fine of rupees 5,000. So please mark section 28 and 29. It will help you to understand the hierarchy as well as the more important thing, which is that what kind of sentence can be pronounced by each court in the hierarchy of the criminal courts, starting from the High Court to Court of Session to Assistant Session Judge to CMM, CJMs, JM First Class, Metropolitan Magistrate, and then at the lowest level, JM Second Class. So we will continue our discussion tomorrow, discuss a little bit more about these courts, how these are created, who creates these courts, and how the presiding officer of these courts are appointed, and who is the authority under CRPC appointing the courts. No, it's not about heinous crimes. It's about, I'll tell you, it's not like so difficult. I'll show you the first schedule, and then you will be at a kind of a level of relief. आपको इन लगेगा कि ये ट्रबल करेगी आपको चीज. इसके लिए ना आपको सीआरपीसी का शेड्यूल पढ़ना पड़ेगा. वहां पे लिखा हुआ है कि किस अपराध की ट्रायल आईपीसी के अंडर कौन सा जज करेगा, और जो जज ट्रायल करेगा इसका मतलब उसको ट्रायल करने का इसलिए पावर मिला है बिकॉज दैट जज इज एम्पावर्ड टू pronounce the maximum sentence that has been provided for that offense under the provisions of IPC, and it's simple, it's not that difficult. अंदाजा लग जाता है आपको इसको. ये जो हम 10 साल 7 साल की बात कर रहे हैं, इसका मतलब ये है कि इतना सेंटेंस प्रोनाउंस कर सकता है, तो यू शुड रीड इट एज 10 कि जिस अपराध की सजा मैक्सिमम 7 साल है, तो इसका मतलब आपको ये अंदाजा हो जाना चाहिए that offense shall be tried by the CJM's कोर्ट और CMM's कोर्ट, मैक्सिमम 7 साल जिसकी सजा है. क्योंकि अगर किसी अपराध की सजा मैक्सिमम 7 साल है, उसका ट्रायल जीएम फर्स्ट क्लास कर लेगा, तो वो तो 3 ही साल तक की मैक्सिमम सजा दे सकता है ना. बट इफ द केस इज अ फिट केस इन विच अ 5 ईयर का सेंटेंस कैन बी प्रोनाउंस्ड और 6 इयर्स का सेंटेंस और मैक्सिमम 7 इयर्स का सेंटेंस कुड बी प्रोनाउंस्ड, तो फिर तो वो तो उसकी ट्रायल नहीं कर सकता ना. तो अगर फॉर एग्जाम्पल मर्डर का ट्रायल है इन विच द पनिशमेंट इज ईदर डेथ और लाइफ इम्प्रिजनमेंट, अब ये सजा कौन दे सकता है? कोर्ट ऑफ सेशन. इसलिए द ऑफेंस शैल बी ट्राइड बाय कोर्ट ऑफ सेशन. बट वी विल डिस्कस मोर अबाउट इट विद द हेल्प ऑफ फर्स्ट शेड्यूल. सुहासिनी.